Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. This is Daniele Cattedu. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at the Cloud Security Alliance. Great pleasure and honor for me to be here today to moderate this amazing panel on the international adoption of Zero Trust. With me, I have four distinguished panelists, all of them representing different stakeholders in this market, predominantly the providers of services, but in general, we are looking at individuals who are extremely knowledgeable and hands-on into Zero Trust, both in terms of its adoption and strategizing and adoption, but also in terms of experience of trying to push forward the logic of Zero Trust. So I would like my panelists to introduce themselves. I would like to call first on this virtual stage, James Tu.
Sure. Okay, this is James Tu. I'm head of global security management at TSMC. We headquartered in Taiwan. I think TSMC may not be well known, and I think we make chips for all the Apple phones, NVIDIA chips, and that's the company is. A company with 80,000 employees with revenue $100 billion. And so I'm responsible for cybersecurity, inside detection, data protection, and the physical security. By the way, I met John Kindervar, the Zero Trust guru in 2019, actually. I pulled down him with a cup of coffee and said, John, tell me what exactly happened, how you come up with Zero Trust. And I sold on the Zero Trust. And I met him couple times since then already. It's a good friend of me.
Excellent. Thank you very much, James. Sean Connolly.
Yeah, hi, everyone. My name is Sean Connolly. I'm now a Zscaler, but I recently just left the United States government. I was at CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and I was part of the team at the U.S. government that helped lead the adoption of Zero Trust across all the U.S. federal agencies and departments. Some of the works that I help contribute to or co-author, NIST 800-207, the special publication on Zero Trust architecture. Of course, the OMB White House memo on Zero Trust strategy, we can talk a little bit about. Then also as one of the lead co-authors of CISA's Zero Trust maturity model, and a bunch of others. But in reality, it was all just focused on how helping agencies adopt Zero Trust across their missions and services. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sean. LJ Koning.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Liewe-Jan Koning, LJ, if you want to remember it. I'm a CTO of Ontoit, and we offer, well, we've already been offering for a decade Zero Trust managed services. And my job is basically to make sure that exfiltrations don't happen, that breaches don't happen, and then you automatically get to Zero Trust. I mean, we have to thank John Kindervaag, I think he's a common friend of all of ours, a lot for that, but that's what we're practicing day in, day out. And I'm headquartered in the Netherlands, and we also are very active in the United States markets.
Thank you very much, LJ. Last but not least, Lars Rudenkate.
Thank you, Daniele. I'm Lars Rudenkate. I work for Microsoft, and I had the pleasure working with the state of Switzerland during the last years. On top, I also sometimes am in change with National Security Agency in other parts of Europe. So I represent the Zero Trust journey in Europe in this panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lars. Now, as you can see, we have decades of experience in Zero Trust in this panel. So we are going to do our best in order to make sure that we can offer you all the information that you need. Now, let's get started and dive into the topic of the panel. And I would like to start with a very general question for all of you, really. So we have been noticing, especially in the public sector and in critical sector just as well, a very aggressive adoption of Zero Trust, a trend that has started certainly in the US, given a substantial political momentum. Sean Connolly was referring earlier to his experience at CISA, and I'm sure he's going to be able to offer some more insight there. But generally speaking, why do you think other geographies, other regions outside US should move as aggressively as US is towards zero trust? What zero trust is adding, in your opinion, to this to the strategy and to the set of strategical options that we have currently available, and why it can be so important and is according to the opinion of many, possibly the best strategy for cybersecurity and governance?
Actually, I would like to start, Daniele. I think there are two things that we must keep in mind. US has done a tremendous job of driving this, thanks also to Sean. And what I see in Europe is what I call a restart of zero trust. Why do I frame it like this? In Europe, there was somehow the tendency for some time during the last years that if you buy certain products, you are now doing zero trust. And this really was not bringing the benefit to the companies who need to adopt their strategy. And as a consequence, I've seen zero trust as let's say, a partially burned topic in Europe. But now it gets really a lot of traction again, while people not necessarily openly say they are now doing zero trust. And the reason is twofold. So you have one direction that is really regulation. So we have multiple regulations upcoming in Europe, like NIS2, DORA, and also critical infrastructure ones. And you see this really across industry domains. So instead of doing one European regulation, we do this per industry. And as a consequence, people are starting to realize that their standard approach of just doing an ISO 27001 is not enough. And when they start to rethink what they need to do, and as a consequence, there are some consulting firms that do a good job in context of zero trust, and people are now realizing, oh, I thought I'm doing zero trust and I'm not, because it's a strategy and not a product. The second thing that roughly everybody in this room will confirm is the tremendous growth of cybercrime around the world. I have just seen recently some numbers in the Microsoft Digital Defense reports highlighting if cybercrime would be a country, it would be already the third biggest GDP in the world. Meaning you have number one, US, and if I remember correctly, second one is China. And then there's not anymore Germany, France, or anything else. It is cybercrime. If you would count Europe as one country, okay, they go down to place number 4, but still they are, as seen as a country, the third country now. And they are growing tremendously with over 10% per year. So this is quite impressive. And as a consequence, companies really start to feel the pressure to change, but not only companies, also private people. And I really can tell you, I had recently a phishing email that was really bringing me to sweating. It had really the consequence that I directly changed my password and I directly informed my company, check also my company phone because also my private email app is there. It was a typical phishing scam, but really how they improve, because they have completely faked my private email domain and have claimed that they have hacked my server with root service software. Was impressive, even as a private person being in the domain, but really sweating for 2 hours.
Thank you very much, Lars. Let's keep open up the discussion based on this question, and perhaps I would like to hear from from James, LJ, and Sean. So certainly, Lars was referring to a number of trends that we see in the market, which will be coming at us regardless of zero trust. The increased level of sophistication of the threat landscape is something that it will be there. It's with us, and it's going to continue regardless of whatever we wish or will. But then I guess the question is, how and why do you think zero trust is the right answer to those challenges?
Let me have a take on that. To me, Zero Trust, when we 15 years ago or so were confronted with customers constantly being hacked, and it was hard to really have a sustainable way of securing their environments. Zero Trust was there, and the beauty of Zero Trust is it started, of course, as a networking architecture, more or less. But to me, the beauty of Zero Trust is that it's in a way technology independent. As we see, I mean, since Zero Trust was incepted over a decade, really, ago, and today nothing really has changed. I mean, the way we explain it, and of course the adoption, and certainly how the regulations have been increasingly supportive of the architecture of the strategy, that has changed. But in essence, it is all about eliminating trust in its core, and I think that's a crucial thing to remember. I mean, we now see the emergent threats of AI, for example. We've seen the transition to cloud, and we didn't have to change Zero Trust in itself, and I think that has been a crucial fundamental drive that Zero Trust is still there. I mean, how many things can you mention besides email, maybe, that survived for so many years and are still very, very relevant today? And if we're looking at to your earlier question on how Europe, in my case Europe, is adopting Zero Trust, well, we've seen a change here. I mean, yes, America led the way with the executive order and stack report. That's all great content, and that is a push from above, right? So, and that has changed for us in the market, because before, when that didn't exist, it was a technology pool almost. Customers who really wanted to be secure were thinking of, hey, how are we going to achieve this? And then the idea of eliminating lateral movement by indeed eliminating trust in network, segmenting network, that was much more a technical play back then. And now we have the extra support and visibility at the board level. So we've seen a tremendous change in how companies deal with Zero Trust and how they start doing it.
Great. This is James. Maybe I can chime out a little bit. I think I agree with you guys talk about. I think from data protection perspective, right? I think John tell us about Zero Trust, about what? Understand the critical assets, services, the process, right? So that's the important thing, to understand what's important. Then we have the parameter, understand the in, out, the access policy. That's how we do our inside data protection, and data protection also, right? I think that's the core about Zero Trust. You really need to understand what's important for your company, what you want to try to protect. I think that's right in the core about Zero Trust. That's why we're using Zero Trust.
Apologies for the interruption, but let me ask you a question right there, because you mentioned a very essential, essential step of Zero Trust, which is the definition of the protect surface. Now, and as you were rightly commenting, we need to understand our priorities, and we need to understand what is important to us, important for us and to us, and then start from there. Now, my question though is, did we really need our good friend John Kindervag to tell us so? I mean, isn't that like the standard logic and common sense that should have applied to cybersecurity since day one? So then the question is, so Zero Trust, I guess, is not just about identifying what we need, but it's also, I guess, a totally new logic, or a more coherent logic to how we protect ourselves. Would you agree with that? Or how do you see other good differences from Zero Trust compared to other models that are making it so unique and so necessary for a future of our cybersecurity?
Yeah, so to me, what John Kindervag taught us, the most value in this is the way of communicating it. He made it so very, very simple, and so very, very simple to understand. And he teaches us to start with one thing, start small, and then build on top of that. I think that is crucial, that it's easy to adopt Zero Trust. I think that made a ton of difference. And of course, in a very, well, again, governments helped a lot in that by demanding, hey, listen, go look at Zero Trust, because initially it wasn't very obvious to people that we would have to split our data center into pieces and segment it out and everything. And there was a ton of people that said, nah, it's not going to work. We need a bigger firewall that doesn't exist. And there were lots of technical hurdles, perceived technical hurdles, I think. And what John did is make that very, very simple and explain, listen, you're doing it wrong, basically, right? And I think that helped tremendously. At least what I see with customers, if they hear his story, read his papers. I mean, his initial concept of the No More Chewy Centers white paper when he was at Forrester, for example, that's an eye opener for many people. Still today, by the way, completely different from the trust model we had before.
Yeah, I think, John, we talk about, right? Zero trust, I think Law mentioned, is not a product. A lot of people try to marketing, right? Zero trust is a concept, the methodology, how you do security management. Okay, that's if you know the zero trust concept, then you can how to apply your company environment, achieve the cybersecurity protection. I think that's very important.
Yeah, you say zero trust products do not exist. Huh? There are products who work really well in zero trust, by the way, but everybody who says they have a zero trust project and ask more, right?
Sean,
Which question you want me to hit here, Danielle?
yeah, so I guess I would like still to hear your opinion about why zero trust is supposed to be implemented in Europe and elsewhere. So what is it makes so unique, and why it's supposed to be so obvious for policymakers and those in charge of or critical infrastructure? Why zero trust is the key answer?
Sure. I think Lars and LJ talked a little bit where I was going ahead. So if we go back to we just spoken about No More Chewy Centers, that paper is out for about 10 plus years. There was already efforts within the federal government towards moving toward zero trust architectures or strategies. But what really happened around 2020 was a combination of factors for the U.S. government, why the U.S. was had a momentum shift, if you will, towards embracing zero trust. One was the SolarWinds attack, and just the way the supply chain attack took awareness of the leadership and how now technology can be both used and abused by adversaries. And so that was one reason. A second reason was the pandemic, of course, and Lars was talking a little bit about the shift to telework and just the way we had to be able to support new policies from the federal government to help the agencies as the majority of their workforce was now working from home. And then third thing I think goes back to where James is going a little bit towards was the adoption of new technologies and how we are looking at embracing security in new ways. And a lot of this goes towards pushing security out to the edge. And when I say edge, it could be security in terms of identity management and be able to segment identities different ways. It could be segmentation towards endpoint detection response and be able to put agents on endpoints to understand what's going on those endpoints. It could be SASE and ZTNA, and now moving away from that legacy castle and moat philosophy. So I think those three things pushed the adoption across the U.S. government faster. And to answer your question then, Daniela, those same questions that the U.S. government had 3, 4, 5 years ago now are being asked across the international governments and organizations towards how can we protect our data better, just like James was talking about. We know we have a very large and porous attack surface. So ideally, we need to shift that focus from trying to protect the entire attack surface and focus on what are the critical assets and how we can protect them in new ways.
So I'll stay a second with you, Sean, as you have the mic. You mentioned a few events, one in particular, which has been the President Biden executive order, which certainly has been, one of the main reasons for the for the momentum in the U.S. market. Now, do you guys see any similar political or policy move happening either in Europe or in Asia that could give the same boost and the same effect that we have seen in US?
So
go ahead, Sean.
What I was going to say real quick was one of the interesting things about the zero trust momentum, and like you mentioned, Danielle, the Cyber Executive Order 14028 and the White House OMB memo that accompanied it, was the level of attention from senior leadership at the White House. Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, and the OMB team, they were working across their counterparts, if you will, the assistant secretaries and deputy secretaries. These would be like the number 2 or number 3 at the agencies. And so what's different about Zero Trust versus earlier and other cybersecurity initiatives was we had that both bottom up, if you want to consider like the operational and practitioners like myself help and support policy. But we also had, like you were saying, that top down leadership push from above to help drive Zero Trust adoption at the agencies. Now, I think where your point's going, we're seeing that same type of discussions at that same leadership levels from the White House, from different agencies across their peers in international governments, and they're trying to understand how they can have that that top-down leadership incentive, if you will, to help those agencies and help those organizations drive a Zero Trust adoption across those organizations.
Thank you, Sean. James.
Okay, I think even though Taiwan right now is the leading semiconductor supply chain, I think the government actually called the Agency of National Institute of Cybersecurity. Actually, they proposed from 2022, actually start proposed 3 focus. And the number 1 actually focused on identity and authentication. Obviously, will be strong password, biometric, multi-factor authentication, and passwordless, and the phishing-resistant authentication. And the 2023, I think they moved for device authentication. To me, I think it's extremely important. And for device authentication, that's what we call phishing-resistant multi-factor authentication. I think right now in 2024, actually, is promoting is more like a Microsoft kind of conditional access with situation awareness, called trust inference verification, user device location application, risk-based access control, because that's the way how to guarantee support the semiconductor supply chain. They treat this as a national security issues, cybersecurity.
LJ or Lars, I mean, would you like to add anything on the specific drivers, the specific or possible policy measure that in Europe are taken that could support or accelerate the adoption of Zero Trust?
As Willy mentioned, there are multiple ones already driving it because they are, let's say, confirmed to come. This is how I phrase DORA, NIS2, critical infrastructure regulation. And these regulations are a consequence of that, let's put it like this, that politicians are not happy how often breaches are still happening due to GDPR. And that's why we are now making it in a form of, okay, we get it. You as the CEO of a company, you are still thinking GDPR, okay, I report and I'm done. So now we are going into a different approach and go into, let's put it like this. We as the European Commission and Parliament believe that if you are not taking cybersecurity serious, you should have a private liability on the C-level, meaning you on the C-level cannot anymore say, oh, by the way, I get my bonus because I accomplished my sales targets. Oh, there was a breach, happens. No, you as a C-level can get now a multi-million fine that is not allowed to be covered by your company. So this is a very drastic approach, but it is a different philosophy than the USA. The USA is normally like, we believe it is good, so go. And Europe normally comes really like with a hammer. Don't do this or do it differently. So this is really a cultural difference that I see happening. And it is really like, it will come, it will be enforced. And you see also something that we have not mentioned in the US with the DoD. So the DoD has this CMMC regulation, and it is not specific to US companies. It is like, if you want to make business with us, this is your guideline that you have to follow. And if you don't have it, by 2028, you will not do any business with us anymore. There was really a very interesting article on LinkedIn by Chase Cunningham. He is also counted as a second person to John who drives Zero Trust. And I really like his easy explanation of what it means. And, this will also affect companies in Europe. If you are a military producer, so the DIP, you want to make business with US, do it or you're out.
Thank you.
May I add to that?
Lars.
Even in
Go ahead,
so
LJ.
May I add to that even if a standard or a regulation does not mention zero trust specifically or it predates it, for example, PCI DSS, zero trust is still the answer. And what we see is that many companies recognize this. And luckily at the board level, so we now see a push from above, hey, this zero trust idea, strategy, thing you need to embrace is the thing that solves anything, basically. And that is really valuable, I think. And it's also very efficient, by the way.
Thank you. Now, Lars, you mentioned few laws or regulations here in Europe that are meant to be a sort of driver to zero trust, or the requirements included in these three pieces of legislation, which are the NIS2, so the Network and Information Security Directive number 2, DORA, and the CRA, which is the Resilience Act, the Cyber Resilience Act. Specifically on the CRA, there are certainly there will be very profound implication in Europe, but also with for any companies that is really working within the European market in terms of supply chain governance. And as you were mentioning, Lars, there will be the need of providing the necessary evidence and in order to demonstrate that you're secure, that you can be part of a secure supply chain. Now, from this perspective, while these regulations are certainly one possible accelerator to the zero trust adoption, if you would need to talk to someone operating in Europe, that it will be within the scope of at least two of them, like let's say NIS and CRA directive, what would be your recommendation? Why zero trust again could be a way to somewhat reduce that compliance burden that is likely to come out from the compliance with the three regulation I mentioned?
I mean, one thing that in my personal opinion is completely underrated in the context of zero trust is the start. And with the start, I mean, understand what you want to protect, understanding your data flows, and then come up with the architecture to protect it before you go to monitor everything. And overall in the industry, I see very often that I call a tendency after the blast versus before the blast. And zero trust really tremendously reduces your attack surface if done right. As a consequence, you get much clearer signals and you can also much easier really put it in metrics. Before it is just like, I don't know what to focus on. And after it is like, oh, I now see an attack incoming because many other signals are gone, because they are blocked, because I take care of my ports, for example. And if you just look at the current situation, to give you a very simple example, currently we have big bot networks with light bulbs because the manufacturer of light bulbs found it as a great idea that we now can switch them on and off with our Wi-Fi signals, enabling still light bulbs being mini computers to make DDoS attacks. After the Critical Infrastructure Act, you don't know how it completely will be phrased, how it will be handled, but there is a possibility that you as a light bulb producer, once the act is active, might be liable if your light bulbs is not being protected to become a DDoS net. So you must be able to think how I can prove this is what I do so that my light bulbs are not coming to a DDoS attack. But the current situation is like, it's like a nice to have. You can claim, yes, I'm doing something to protect my light bulbs. So this is really a complete regulatory change that will force people to rethink. And the current situation is we are doing very less. To come to a secure state, we need to do a lot. When people will do an analysis, and then during the analysis, many companies will realize zero trust has a tremendous benefit versus many other options, and this drives it indirectly.
Thank you, Lars. So LJ, same question for you. How zero trust is going to help me if I need to satisfy the requirements of the NIS Directive 2 and CRA, the Cyber Resilience Act in Europe?
Yeah, certainly. So, like I said, it's a strategy that works. I mean, they all those regulations in some form have its goal that data is not leaked, right? And to Lars's point, starting with understanding what you need to protect, what is valuable to you, that is something that is, I think, crucial and indeed underrated currently. We still see a lot of customers starting with building a security operations center, analyzing log files, for example. And of course, that has its value. But zero trust, I mean, there's 5 steps for a reason. The first step is to start with figuring out what do you need to start with. Now, and the benefit that's often overlooked in this is that if you know what you are protecting, you can also prioritize what you are protecting. So it's also all resources are scarce, whether it's people, whether it's money, whether it's equipment that we can put in. So we need to be very careful in where we put our effort. And what zero trust gives you is it's a paradigm shift, where you're going to think in the stuff I want to protect. So these are my ATMs, these are my MRI scanners or whatever, and I want to protect this. And I'm going to make very specific changes in my infrastructure to protect those around me and protect this piece of data from the rest of the world instead of trying to do everything at once, which we know you will fail. So the answer to the question is, I think, you got to do it like this. I mean, I simply do not see another way. I mean, if you want to be compliant, what are you going to do? Block all the hackers by buying all the products that may fill a attack surface and solve that piece? I mean, that's not how this works in practice. So yeah, to me, it's a no-brainer that you start figuring out your valuable assets and then one by one secure them. And the side effect of that also is that you have immediate benefits. So if you really start really small, suppose you have maybe an organization feels that email is their most important asset because all communication is in there, for example. Just secure that single thing very well, immediate benefit. Well, what other strategy can say that?
Thank you, LJ. Sean, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, first, thank you both, Lars and LJ, mentioning the NSTAC report. So that's the National Security, I always butcher this, Telecommunication Advisory Committee. That was a report that myself and some others led. We mentioned already John Kindervag and Chase Cunningham, a number of other experts were on that report to the president. And in that report was a 5-step process of how organizations can start on their zero trust journey. That, of course, all came from John Kindervag, but John was kind enough to put that in the report. So thank you for both mentioning that report and understanding the significance of it. Going back to your question, Daniela, another report that I had the privilege of working on was the NIST Zero Trust Architecture, SP 800-207. That report or that paper had 7 different tenets in there. The 4th one I think is the one I'm most familiar with, or prophesized around contextual awareness when making policy decisions. But the 7th tenet, I think, is important for our discussion here. The 7th tenet was being able to log and monitor, then analyze. And that's really the critical thing to zero trust, where you talked about implicit trust and blind trust and how you get rid of that. It's really by having justification. It's by having evidence. It's by having telemetry and having logs. And so having that type of telemetry can be used both for where I'm going, what I mentioned before, making contextual decisions about should something be allowed or not allowed. But a lot of that logging and telemetry can also be used now for the compliance applications as well. And so it's an interesting way of now looking at these logs that are coming off different devices or the cloud providers, or, from your SASE environments. I think the logging, the richness of logging has greatly enhanced over the last 10 years. So using those logs in new ways, both again for access policy decisions, but then also for regulations, I think is critical to where a lot of countries and organizations need to go toward their compliance or where they want to go with a zero trust adoption.
Thank you very much for that, Sean. So essentially, we are telling our audience that the key component there for compliance is certainly our strength and the quality of the logging and monitoring. Now, besides the relevance, which certainly an undisputable truth that is going to be one of the key secret of this a successful compliance posture for any laws or regulation, but it feels particularly relevant for the upcoming 3 new regulations we were referring to in Europe. Now, if we wanted to look at the global market within Europe and within Asia Pac, in your experience talking with customers, discussing with governments and agencies, what are really the quick wins that we can get there? What are those small actions? In some cases, they seem to be kind of obvious and banal, but are going to be kind of key in accelerating again that change of mindset. Because what we have been saying so far is really, zero trust is certainly not a product. It is a strategy. It is going to be almost the only way we have in order to navigate into the very complex threat landscape. But then if we want to put it in action, and if we want to support, especially those organizations that for budget, for skills and expertise, have less resources, what are the quick wins, really?
Is that a question to me or just in general? Sorry.
Well, to you to start with, and then, because you've seen quite a bit. I mean, you have experience, first of all, in looking at, how to support also smaller companies through CISA, now working with Zscaler. I guess you have seen quite a few.
Sure. So there's a lot to unpack there, but toward quick wins, James mentioned it before, phishing resistant MFA, and also the fast identity online FIDO2 technologies and identity providers. When we released the OMB policy and the accompanying CISA zero trust documents, and I say we, there was a group of SMEs, if you will, from the White House, from CISA, from NIST, from some of the other agencies, that had to go to each individual agency and discuss the policy changes. And one of the biggest questions received was specifically around phishing resistant MFA and FIDO2, because it was there was, I wouldn't say resistance, there's just questioning, did OMB, did this CISA team really mean what they said when they read in the policy? Even though the policy said, adopt FIDO2, adopt phishing resistant MFA, what does that really mean? And so we had to go to each agency, discuss the changes that were involved there. So, those discussions couldn't scale, I'm saying, in a way. So we had to, again, discuss each agency. But once agencies understood and believed that, yes, we could start looking at identity providers, that quickly rolled out across the federal government. And that was a game changer. Another one was the SASE solutions themselves, right? Secure Access Service Edge, and the move from the traditional firewall networks. That's a separate program that I help lead, the Trusted Internet Connections program, but helping agencies move away from the legacy architectures and that castle and moat philosophy, and moving more to a dispersed security solution where networks weren't at the same type of architectures, and how they had to protect the data in new ways were two of the quick wins. So I'll leave it there between phishing resistant MFA and SASE.
Thank you very much, Sean. James, would you like to add something?
Sure. I think I had two guys on the call is from Microsoft and the Zscaler, as you shown, and I love both products. I think they have a good solution to support quick win for zero trust. I think the first thing we talk about, I think in addition we talk about very easy, we get rid of text message, right? We got to have this phishing resistant, okay? But two solutions I adopt, Zscaler, by the way, I adopt two times already, okay? I think one thing we can tell my IT guy is you don't need to worry about manage all the firewall, the complexity, open many hole open to the outside. You don't need to open any hole on the firewall. I think that's is the catch. The people listen, right? Because unmanageable the firewall right now with the data centers. Okay, I think the second one I talk about is Microsoft. I think we call all the SaaS application identity very critical. I think we use Azure, for example, and either Google or Amazon with the single or with SAML standard to connect all the other SaaS application with conditional access. So that's the way you can secure all the SaaS application with trust in place. Conditional access, the must win for Microsoft, help a lot, right? And those are the quick wins. Zscaler, dramatic reduce attack space. For example, people work at home, right? We used to grow up with a VPN. Either you're wide open or you have blacklist. Now with the Zscaler ZTNA, you can do whitelist. Even the guy sitting next to me, he may only can see the application a few. Now even I cannot even see it. Right now, a lot of company, inside the company can see all the application, even though you may not have the authentication authorization for the application. But with the ZTNA, dramatically reduced the attack surface, ease of management. I think of Microsoft for SaaS, conditional access, Zscaler, data center security. Those are quick wins.
Thank you very much. Now, I was referring more in general, but I'm sure that both Microsoft and Zscaler are going to appreciate the free commercial.
Yeah, I'm of a little bit different opinion in the sense that I think we should honor the 5 steps. That may seem no wonder because the NSTAC report that we already discussed, I mean, John Kindervag wrote it and helped doing it while he was with onto it actually. So we have a lot of discussion about that part. And I think we really should start at step one, which is indeed figure out the asset that you want to protect and then map the transaction flows. And 3 is architect the security around it. There has been no product so far in that journey. That comes in step 4 and 5, where we actually created technical policy. And what we've seen, especially in larger organizations, because in larger organizations it's really hard to get a complete movement in a certain direction properly done. We call this authentic zero trust, actually. And by that I mean that it is we need to generate some kind of a snowball effect. So if you start really small and do the 5 steps all the way from 1 to 5, where 5 is look at all the log files and do the security operations center function, and 4 is implement all the products. But those are in 4 and 5. Really figure out what you need to do. Start learning first. I mean, appoint a zero trust champion in an organization. Make sure that the CISO and the CIO work together. I mean, zillion of times we've seen that it's really hard to get an IPS in blocking mode, for example, in an organization. Why? Because the networking team, availability is all they care about, right? And rightfully so. I understand that. You don't want your commercial site to go down, your web shop to go down. However, I think every organization should pick one. Well, we always do 5 initially when we engage with a customer, but at least 1 protect surface and do this perfectly well, and then repeat this. So it becomes like
LJ,
a craft.
I'm going to stop you there. Clearly, we would love to continue this conversation for hours. Certainly, we have.
If you don't stop me, we will finish tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm sure. We have been mentioning the 5 steps a few times. So for those of you in the audience that have not yet go through the 5 steps and all the literature that there is around it, CSA has been doing some work under the guidance and with the collaboration of John Kay. So definitely a must read for everyone and a must implement. Now, we are unfortunately almost running out of time. I think I still have time for one last question before we wrap up. We have heard a lot about AI. Everyone, everywhere is talking about AI and rightly so. We don't need to open a debate on, what are all the threats that AI is bringing along. Certainly, going back to the phishing and social engineering examples that the four of you have been mentioning during this conversation, there are certainly higher. It is very likely that the quality of these attacks is going to increase, both in quality and in scale. Now, 30 seconds, no more. Well, I give you 1 minute each in order to tell me one single reason why AI is supposed to be within the toolkit of any CISO of any organization, really, in order to in order to govern the risk related to AI. LJ.
Certainly. So 30 seconds, you said. I think that AI is just another tool like IPS is, like AV signatures are, that fits perfectly within Zero Trust. Like I said before, Zero Trust is the idea and we change technology all the time. Large data sets to analyze them, large rule sets of firewalls, for example, to quickly analyze those. That is what current AI is really good at. However, we need to really be careful following this trend, because ask me again in 6 months, you'll have a completely different answer. I'm convinced of that.
Thank you, LJ. Sean, would you like to go next?
Sure. I think one thing that's been interesting in AI. So each of the federal agencies were required to write these implementation plans and offer them to OMB. I've listened to Randy Resnick, the DoD Zero Trust Portfolio Management Officer, and the DoD, they had, I forget, 50 plus plans they had to read. And it was tough in terms of reading these long narrative, 10,000 word plans. And so Randy was proposing that somehow AI be used to help read those plans. Now, on the other side of the coin, I think at some point agencies are going to start writing or using AI both for writing these plans and then also for greater compliance, like we're discussing before, for compliance regulations. So in my head, kind of where LJ was going was, I'm curious to see what's going to be happening if we're going to have AI to help write the compliance, then AI to both score the compliance. Where is this going to go long term? So some interesting discussions, and who knows where we're going to land in a few months, let alone a few years with this.
Thank you, Sean. James, and then Lars.
Okay, so I think a quick thing about, again, AI ingests all the data, then you have a data leaking issue, right? I think that's the Zero Trust. Make sure the data, you carry the boundary. Doesn't matter the new application, AI application, or the API, the downstream, you carry the access control in place. That's why the Zero Trust, the best thing, guidance about design new AI applications. That's it. Thank you.
Lars.
Actually, I think, ChatGPT was a great moment for all of us, because before, let's say 2022, everybody was saying we have sophisticated cybersecurity products. With 2023, everybody was putting down their hands and telling, by the way, all our cybersecurity products use AI for defense. And I think this means also AI is really essential for automation and visibility of attacks overall. And when you already hear from all companies roughly that have a certain size, how difficult it is to analyze all the signals. On the other hand, you have nation-state actors that are really persistent in attacking certain companies in the supply chain. So I think in the future, we will also see something, let's say, something like national SOCs that try to protect all the companies in a country. And imagine now you have not the signals of one large company, but the signals of a country, because you own all the network in the country. Imagine how much signals these are. And sorry, AI is the only answer to analyze this needle in the haystack problem.
Thank you for that. Few more than 30 seconds, Lars, but definitely worth it. Now, with that, unfortunately, we are completely running out of time. So I would like to thank the four of you for this very, very interesting conversation. Certainly, we could not cover and exhaust the relevance of the topic in terms of adoption of Zero Trust in Europe and in Asia Pac, or anyway, in a global scale. I would certainly love to continue this conversation with you, and I'm encouraging the audience to send any possible question they might have for our panelists. And with that, I would like to thank you once again, all of you, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.